There's big news to celebrate in the General Assembly. We all came together to defeat the attack on homeschooling freedoms, and there was another victory you may not know about for church freedoms, but it's not over. There are still ongoing battles over gender surgeries for kids and casinos in local neighborhoods. We're going to tell you all about it. From the Family Foundation, I'm your host, Candy Cushman, with our president, Victoria Cobb. Well, welcome to Speak Up Virginia. We're glad you're joining us today. We've got a lot of serious topics to cover, but I thought I'd start out on a little bit lighter note. And that is, I saw this headline that we have a bill going through to apparently tell people what they have to call the Washington sports team. And I'm really confused about this. First, I thought it was a joke. And then I thought, why are we telling people what they have to call their sports team? And why are we talking about a team that's not even in Virginia? So please help me understand what's going on here.
It's kind of ridiculous. But essentially, I have to give a tiny bit of background. It's about license plates, which is even more ridiculous. So in Virginia, you used to, we have all these specialty license plates. If you look around, you've got every cause on a license plate. Not all states do that. We do. And you used to have to pass the existence of one by one through the General Assembly. If you want a license plate to save the owls, that was a bill and a whole ordeal, and it used to waste so much time. And that's how an original license plate went in that says the Washington Redskins. So that thing is in our code saying there's this license plate that people can get. Now, they changed the whole system, and you actually don't have to do it that way anymore. And I thought they just grandfathered all the old stuff and took it out of the code. I thought it was all gone. I was wrong. It's all in there. And so they feel the need to fix this. This is the most pointless piece of legislation because you're not getting new license plates that have it. It's absolutely absurd, and more absurd is the history of the entire football team's name, which the fact that we can't call them the Redskins anymore, and they had to go by the Washington football team, which to me, that was the most embarrassing 2 years of that team's history. Yeah. And now we're calling them the Commanders, but we can't use any of the old symbols. And if you go to the NFL shop, you can't even get old Redskins stuff. So if you went to the NFL shop and you wanted to get your merch, you could still get Houston Oilers stuff. But the Redskins are so toxic, you can't even get something that has
so unpolitically correct.
Yes, it's just we're so busy on all the wrong things. Anyway, that's the deal.
All right. Well, thank you for educating me. We all know I'm not the biggest sports fan around here.
Well, they lost anyway to the Eagles, so let's just remind everybody who's going to be in the Super Bowl. Not that I'm a fan.
Don't get us in trouble, Victoria. Well, I don't know. It just looks like to me we need our own team, and didn't Youngkin try to get our own a stadium?
Yes, correct. And that's been a whole thing. The fact that Virginia has almost 9 million people and we don't have any professional sports teams that are actually located in Virginia does indeed bother me. I think that the time is past come. We don't have baseball. We don't have football. Come on. Sports fans are. But so that is our team. We adopt the Washington, D.C. teams. So,
okay.
Anyway.
All right. Well, we do have some serious updates for you on what's going on in the General Assembly. But before we dive into that, let's talk about what's going on at the national level. Because last week we talked about how Trump was just on this tear, reversing the woke, and he is still on a roll. And most recently, one of the things he's done is end federal funding for these invasive gender transition treatments on kids.
Yeah, it's pretty phenomenal. We know, dozens of states actually have laws that say do no harm. You are not going to have these kind of surgeries. But the fact that he basically went in and said, no, this thing is bad. We are not going to have this anywhere is fantastic for those states like ours that haven't yet come along.
Yeah. And then on top of that, you had RFK Jr.'s hearing.
Right.
And there was this moment when Senator Josh Hawley asked him, are you going to rescind this Biden rule that essentially required doctors, health providers, they could be forced to do these invasive gender transition procedures on kids, even if it violated their conscience, they didn't think it was medically wise or ethical, they could be forced to do that. So let's just listen to that exchange.
President Biden's administration, his HHS, issued a rule, so it's binding, requiring that every doctor in America, including pediatricians who receive any kind of federal funding, so that's anybody who takes ACA funding, anybody who takes CHIP funding, this is almost every health provider in America, requiring them to conduct gender transition and gender so-called affirming procedures. So that means hormones, that means puberty blockers, that means surgeries in some cases. They imposed that rule on doctors across the country. This has been litigated, and it has been actually stopped by a couple of courts who found that it was way outside of HHS's jurisdiction. My question to you is, will you rescind this rule that imposes this radical policy, and talk about being anti-science, this radical policy on just about every pediatrician in the United States of America?
Yes, I will. And by the way, that rule is anti-science. The most thorough meta review on gender-affirming care has come out in the Cass report, which reports really catastrophic impacts on children. And that is science. It's a meta review of all the existing scientific studies. But, even more just from a common sense.
Well, I am glad he came down with a solid answer on that, because we do need to make sure that the people who are going to be implementing these policies are willing to do what I think Trump's headed in the right direction. We need the whole team behind him. And what's really exciting, I think, is what we're seeing, how this is affecting already our hospitals down here in Virginia.
Yeah, this news came out that VCU is suspending these gender transition procedures for kids. You have in that confirmation hearing the mention of the Cass study and how that showed it was so devastating on kids, and what, Trump administration is really leading out on this, and it is having a ripple effect to protecting kids in our communities. So it is encouraging. But once again, we're seeing the legislators go the opposite direction here in Virginia. Tell us what's going on with that.
Yeah, somehow we can't seem to get the memo and just get in line. We actually have bills that are actually going the exact opposite direction, as you say. So Senator Hashmi, one who has often put in bills that we talk about on this show, Senate Bill 1098, and it basically makes Virginia a sanctuary state. We had something like this last year. I think we've talked about it before. A sanctuary state for anybody who wants to help a child go through these any kind of gender care surgeries or help or whatever they call it. And it literally would kind of make them no liability.
Yeah, Senator Hashmi seems kind of stuck or razor focused on these issues.
Definitely.
She showed up at the Chesterfield County School Board meeting when the parents were asking for Youngkin's parental rights provisions to go through on the transgender issues. So I don't know what that obsession is, but she just keeps putting these things through that kind of stick it in the eye of parents.
She's also stuck on this idea that nobody should be held responsible. Not only don't do it. Laws often, tell you don't do it. It's also and no one can have any kind of subpoena ever against them. It just feels like she's going to this extra length to make sure that, these people are never able to get in trouble for anything they do. And even just the wording around that is super scary. And it's, unfortunately, we're seeing similar things in our abortion amendment too. So we'll talk about that later. But there are other amendments, other things that she's trying to do the same thing in.
Yeah. And so that's Senate Bill 1098 at the time that we're taping this was going through.
Yes, it is on its way to pass the Senate, unfortunately. We are hoping that someone else, besides just straight party line, will stand up and say, no, this is a bad idea.
Yeah, and that bill mixes these gender transition things, as she's calling it, gender-affirming care, sanctuary state for that, and that abortion. Word. She's got that in there, too.
Yes, it's let's just take all the bad stuff and make it, great and easy to do in Virginia and
Yeah.
It's terrible.
All right, well, back to the positive real quick. Another thing we saw coming out of the Trump administration last week was this bold executive order supporting educational freedom for families. So tell us how that might help families, Victoria.
Yeah, this is fantastic. Again, you've got lots of states moving on this. Virginia is not where we want it to be. So this is really good news for our state. But what he's doing is, educational freedom is complicated because it's related to funding and funding formulas. So what he's doing is he's basically saying, we're going to give orders to all these different areas that hand out money in relation to education. And we're going to say, you figure out the best possible way we can promote educational choice through the funding. How can we redo federal funding formulas, for example, to actually have money follow the child? How can we redo certain military education grants so that the money can get to the child and the child can go where they want to go, so that the parent is sure that their child is getting the best education? So he's, it's a bunch of go figure this out and figure it out fast. There are 90 days. I want to see X, Y, and Z. So it's just a very clear statement of this is the direction we're going. I want all my agencies and everybody that touches education to be heading in this direction, which is fantastic.
And the idea is to give families the choice with the funding tied to that child. So that could involve if they want to send their child to a private school that reflects their viewpoint, or homeschooling, or just even tutoring or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, every child that goes to school, the funding. There's funding at the federal level. There's funding at the state level. There's funding that the locals put into different things like building buildings and all the things. So it's really, I mean, there's three ways we can try to move money in the direction of, instead of the building and the structure and the box, we can actually get it to tie to the kid and let the kid not be assigned based on their zip code, which educational process they get.
Yeah, it just seems like we should have had movement
Old school,
on this
like
long
we're in the
ago.
21st century, like let's move along. Like this is the new wave, and it's been there.
Well, I am really proud to say that the Family Foundation has been out in front on this issue, and we had Kids Deserve More Day before even the Trump announcement, advocating this very thing, educational freedom for families here in Virginia. So that was at the Richmond Capitol a few days ago. But yet again, same old story. You've got the legislators in both chambers, the leftist legislators going the opposite direction. So bring us up to speed. What happened with this now infamous bill, SB 1031?
Yes, the homeschoolers.
Yes.
A lot of folks have seen this because it's getting a lot of traction, but this was a bill that was, I mean, instead of focusing on getting more freedom for people, we're focused on, well, who are those terrible homeschoolers and what are they doing over there? Because we can't control that. And so they created a bill that was actually going after the religious exemption. So there's about 6,500 Virginians who use a religious exemption. And what that means is they're not going to have to be turning in test scores and all this stuff to the state. So it's sort of like we're going to drive the education of our child and the state can just stay out. And so this bill was tracking to pass, thankfully, with a lot of great pressure from homeschoolers. I mean, they came out in droves. They had just partnered with us in so many ways of just blocking this bill. And finally, first it went down to a study. So it went from, we're going to go in and we're going to regulate these folks to, okay, well, let's at least study it, which there's nothing to study. This is absurd. And the study was going to be driven by all left, like it was going to be such a biased study based on the way the bill was built. So anyway, and then they finally just said, okay, like there's so much pressure. I think the Democrats even realized, we don't want to, I mean, keep in mind, homeschooling is not universally Republican. There are plenty of liberals and Democrats that also homeschool their kids. So this is pressure coming from even some of their own base. Yeah. And so that was really powerful.
I love this. I think even the Democrats realize you don't mess with homeschooling moms. Bottom line, they are going to come out.
Yes.
Don't mess with them. So that was fun to watch that play out.
And I hope every other conservative group that maybe you're not a homeschooler, but I hope you watched this and said, like, this group makes a difference, and they blocked a liberal bill in a liberal legislature. Yeah. I would love pro-lifers to have that level of engagement and go, we can do this too, or people that are standing up for family values. Like, this was a model of people showing up and calling their legislators and actually getting the job done, and it was great to watch and be a part of.
Yeah, and to that point, it illustrated why it's important to show up early, because a lot of people are trying to say, well, now it's just a study, but they understood. The homeschooling moms and dads understood how incremental works. They need to see up front that you're going to come out because, you can chip away at those rights. And I also thought it was stunning because that very same week all this is happening, we had this national report came out that, from the nation's report card, they call it, showing that we are grossly behind with American kids and their reading skills. They have not caught up from COVID. So here we are zoning in on hyper scrutinizing 6,500 families while there's a national crisis with reading skills in our school system. So
we literally have tens of thousands of kids in Virginia that cannot pass the third grade reading SOL. We got to get hyper focused on them, and unfortunately, they keep just throwing more money at the buildings and thinking that that's going to solve the problem. But that's just my take on it.
We have a priority problem.
Yes, we do.
But the parents send a loud message. So let me touch on another topic here, and this is this battle to bring in more casinos into our local communities. And we've been hearing about this from our supporters and pastors. So tell us what's going on.
Yeah, unfortunately, they're specifically trying to add yet another casino. So we have 5 that have been authorized in Virginia and on varying stages of being all built and running. And literally 5 is not enough. So they've come in and said, we want a casino in Fairfax. And, their idea is, this is a big population area. This has a lot of money, this area. This touches a lot of other states. This is like where we want to basically I would say, exploit those that have addiction. And so they've put this forward and to add Fairfax to the list of places that we already have a casino. It's Senate Bill 982. I know we have a lot of Northern Virginians that want to weigh in on this, so I want to make it clear what you can do. So it's Senator Surville's bill, and really we have got to help these legislators understand that these casinos do not create revenue. They take revenue many times from the people who cannot afford to be giving it to the state in losing money.
And local businesses.
Yes,
It takes away, harms local businesses.
Yeah. Well, there's also safety issues. So, I mean, I think folks are aware that casinos are a magnet for things like gangs, things like sex trafficking. And Tyson's, I mean, this is a pretty urban area anyway. So they have some of these issues already flagged up there. The last thing you need to do is sort of bring in one more thing that's going to kind of increase all of those activities.
Yeah, my understanding is they're looking at the Tyson's Corner area, which I would think would be really important to a lot of Fairfax families. And as you say, Nova already has a problem with sex trafficking with gangs, and this is going to make it more of a magnet if they do this.
Yeah, and I am not hearing, and there may be a few people in Northern Virginia that want this, it does not sound like it's being driven by the populace. All the people from Northern Virginia keep coming down to the legislature saying, we don't want this in our backyard. Most people don't want a casino in your backyard. Some people are conceptually okay with it. Some people obviously have moral issues with it. But most people, when it comes down to where are you going to put it, they don't want it near them. And that's because they know the outcomes, they know the crime, they know all of this. And so it's being driven by legislators who want to see revenue.
Yeah.
Like we don't have enough. We actually have a surplus right now. Side point.
Interesting. I did see a Democrat opposing it.
Yes.
Jennifer Boysko.
Yeah, there's a bunch of Democrats. It is not interestingly enough, this does not fall perfectly on partisan lines. So there are Republicans that support it, unfortunately, and there are Democrats who oppose it, which is wonderful. So this is one of those things that it's interesting how people line up, and that's why your voice really matters. Don't assume because you have a particular legislator from a particular party that you know how they're voting on this. You don't, probably.
And it makes me sad when you talk about 5 casinos because I'm sorry, I know this simplifies it, but it does feel like they're trying to turn Virginia neighborhoods into Pottersville. So, you just have that image in your mind, and it feels like we're trying to go that direction, and we don't want to surrender to the gambling industry.
It has not been that long from the point at which Virginia only had lottery, a little bit of horse racing, and like bingo, like charitable gaming, they call it. And once the dam broke, it was like there was like all this pressure to get gambling. And it was like the moment that we allowed a little bit of gambling, it's like, now we understand we're going to get all this money and they're fine with everything. I mean, now we have unbelievable sports betting that is just tanking our next generation. And we have 5 casinos already trying to add a 6th. We have a real problem. And the legislature needs to get their priorities straight about families. And really, truly, this is the thing they never seem to remember. When someone goes belly up from their addiction to gambling, they go on the state's dime. That's the safety net, is our taxpayer dollars. So when they think they're gaining money,
that's an interesting point.
They just don't think about the after effect is that person cannot provide for their family. They don't have a job. Guess what? Who supports them? Then they go on Medicaid. Then they go on all the government programs, and there we go. So it's a very frustrating thing that the short-sightedness of elected officials on this particular issue.
Help people understand real quick just how our team works in that. How does our team work to defeat a bill based and then with people's voices adding to that?
Yeah, I mean, so our team, they're starting first, of course, with going through the thousands of bills that get put into the system, and they literally are reading every bill to make sure that there aren't encroachments on the church, there aren't encroachments on homeschoolers. So first, it's really flagging everything in our team.
It in the first place.
Yes, and that is actually, people don't realize that is the most important thing because, things can get missed. And so they're starting there. And then it's developing really a series of talking points, things that helping legislators, knowing what are the important things that they need to highlight for a legislator to be able to understand why this really matters. A legislator dealing with 2,000 bills cannot think about all the details of every bill. It's not a reasonable expectation. And so our job is facilitating their education about the bills that really matter and helping them see the right angles and understanding the right outcomes. Sometimes they just don't, they're just moving fast. They're moving really, really fast. So we're meeting. So our team is over there taking those kind of key points and talking with legislators, sitting down, who's on the committee, who might need education about this, and literally showing up in their offices and having the conversation. And then it's also what we do through email alerts. So again, when we alert folks to these bills, our goal is that you help a legislator know what's in the bill, that they understand not only the facts about the bill, but that their own constituents care about it. So it's that process coming together that finally gets a legislator to go, oh, this might not be a good idea on the church safety stuff.
And then the other piece, bringing the voices to the Capitol.
Yes, and then showing up is
Kids Deserve More Day, Mama Bear Day, and Virginia March for Life coming up April 2nd.
Those things really make an impact. I don't think people understand. It's sort of the legislators, that's why we often wear a similar color and we put on a sticker is because we want the visual idea of like, wow, there's a lot of people that are on this side of this issue. So Mama Bear, a lot of people there for parental rights.
That was a great explanation. So bottom line, thank you for partnering with us in these victories. Thank you for coming out, expressing your voice on the homeschool issue, on the church issue, so we can celebrate those two victories in partnership with you. Keep it up. We are not done yet. We've still got these battles going on over casinos and other things that hurt families. So we'll just leave it there. Thank you for joining us. Remember, we are stronger when we speak together. If you want to help get the word out, share the Speak Up Virginia playlist on YouTube, or if you're on Apple and Spotify, give us that 5-star review to help get the word out. We'll see you next time.